Hey, so I thought I would take a little bit of time to talk to myself, probably future me, um, and partake in some self indulgence by talking about the most recent music that I've been working on, and just give some sort of like updates as to how things are going, where things are going, that type of thing. So up until this point, it's the late hours of November 20th, 2023. And up until this point, there have been three tracks that I've released as demos, released, just uploaded as demos up onto YouTube, that are supposedly, at least for now, going to be the first three tracks on what is currently unofficially album number 4. Um, I didn't do this for Esoteric because the whole point of that album, as the title may suggest, is that if you get it, you get it, and if you don't get it, then you don't really need to. There are a lot of lyrics on that album that more than suggest what that album is about, and that should be enough for people that need to know to figure it out. That's more or less the extent to which I'm going to talk about that album. Um, so yeah, that one has come and gone, and album 4, which is the first album that I've worked on that I don't even really have a working title for as I put it together, is essentially a spiritual successor to that one. Not really, because it doesn't quite continue the story or the narrative that Esoteric had, but it does borrow a lot of like similar musical inspiration and themes from that record. And in a way, it's trying to do the stuff that Esoteric did, but better, in quite a few different ways. So, generally speaking, these three tracks that I've put together, which are pretty much the first three tracks that I've completed for this album. I have a few other songs that are on the back burner, but those are the kinds of tracks that I'm still unconvinced I will even release in any capacity before the album is finished, just because they would work a little better in the context of the album themselves. But these three tracks, I have been very happy with while working on. Part of the goal for me, musically speaking, is throughout the course of the album to truly believe that what I'm working on is the best music that I've done. That's kind of like what drives me in general to make music. Like if I had like a consistent formula that I just stuck to and only did that thing, I would be a lot less inspired to work on new material. So that target of I want to do the best thing I've ever done is kind of what drives me at any point in my music career, if you will. It's not much of a career, but you know what I mean. Um, so I'm quite happy with what I've been working on, and I want to have that feeling with every track that will eventually end up on this album. I don't know how many are going to end up on it, but these three, if the album was to be divided into chapters, that's not how I'm like arranging it in my head. But if there had to be a chapter 1, these three songs would be it. They do feel like they don't really flow into each other, but they have a similar vibe. And once this vibe ends, there's going to be a bit of a tonal shift. The fourth track on the album, at least currently, the way that I have it laid out in my head, is going to be a bit of a slow down, a chill out, just to give a potential future listener a little bit of time to recuperate from everything that just happened, because there's a lot going on. This record, generally speaking, is by far the most like direct and forward I've been with any part of my music up until this point. The lyrics for pretty much all my music so far have been very metaphorical and somewhat imagery based. I'm not quite as good at being able to paint like a mental image and then describe it via lyrics. I'm more of let's just say like storytelling type of person. I prefer that sort of lyrical approach where I don't really do a whole lot of like visual descriptors of things. I more or less focus in on like emotions and narratives. That's generally like where I sit lyrically, and that's where the first few albums have been for me. The first two obviously were both concept albums that had a definite story to them. They had like a point A and a point B, and there was a storyline that was connecting them. The third one was, there's kind of a story in the background. It's not quite as, I want to say, easy to follow as something like The Depths would be, but it generally has a very consistent narrative across pretty much all the tracks, except for maybe one or two that are a minor detour from that narrative, but still carry a very similar message in the overall scheme of what the lyrics were. This one is extraordinarily direct. Pretty much from the very, very get-go, from minute one of Lucid, which is currently, I haven't decided whether that's going to be the final title for this track. It kind of just came up as a random word that I thought of. The lyrics basically tell you that, all the metaphors have been played out. This album's not going to have a lot of those. Like, obviously there still are, because I like that aspect of lyric writing, to like talk about something while describing it in a like related way, but not just strictly saying exactly what it is. But generally, the topics that the album is going to be covering lyrically are going to be very real. As an example, the most recent track, Fake Beach with Plastic Water, is about the ongoing, let's just say, rising prevalence of Gen Z nihilism. I happen to be right on the cusp of being a Gen Z elder, if you will. Like, you could make a case that in some metrics I'm a millennial, but really I'm not. But there's a general consensus amongst people that are my age and younger that things aren't really going so well. And it doesn't seem like they're going to be getting any better anytime soon. And that sort of nihilist approach to life in general is what that track is about. It's about accepting the reality that someone that was born 3 generations ago is on average going to be 10 to 15 times wealthier than you will ever be in your lifetime. And that when someone your age 40 years ago was able to afford a house and sustain a growing family on one job's worth of a wage, people my age need to work something like 3 jobs just to afford rent. That's more or less the reality of what Fake Beach with Plastic Water is. The lyrics kind of talk about like a party that needs to go on. That's basically just life in general. The fact that, life has to go on. The world hasn't exploded yet. So unfortunately, there has to be some sense of, getting up every morning or every day at least and doing something with life while you have it, but it doesn't really feel like anything is that worth it anymore. So that's what that one talks about. And then the second track, We Were Always Here, is a fairly angry one and a fairly personal one to me that talks about the ongoing global rise in transphobia and the fact that it genuinely feels every day for queer people that once again things are getting worse, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of hope that that narrative is going to change anytime soon, which sucks. But that's again the reality of a life where people in my general age category and in my general like social category don't really have much of a say in what happens to them, largely because of the fact that their voting power is near zero. There are still generations that are far older than us that are far more influential in modern day politics that basically remove any of our capacity to at least vote for our future, which leads to a very desperate type of feeling. And that sort of desperation is something that I want to convey with the music on this album. And so by design, as opposed to the first few albums that I've done, musically and production wise, this one is much more desperate sounding. Like, it's not supposed to be a very comfortable listen, if you will. There's a lot of discomfort in everything that is happening musically, and there's a lot of discomfort in everything that's happening production wise. I've made it so that the drums, especially the drums, are extraordinarily in your face. There are certain sections where the drums are designed to like almost jump scare you and to drag you out of the feeling that potentially this is one of those records that you could close your eyes and drift off to. That's unfortunately for those people, this isn't really what the point of this record is. If you can sleep to it, then, go ahead. Not like I really care that much, but that's not really what the goal of it is. So that's why everything sounds very like crunched and pressed. And there isn't a whole lot of air and space to breathe sonically, to put it one way, if you will. So that's more or less what's going on here. And the first track, the one that I haven't quite touched on yet as much, that one is more or less a more direct spiritual successor to what Esoteric was about. So if you can't figure out what Esoteric was from what Lucid is, then I'm sorry, but you're just not going to figure it out. And that's okay. I'm all right with people like that. However, if you are the kind of person that is going to violently disagree with the other points that I'm going to be making across this record and the points that I've made so far on tracks 2 and 3, then I'm sorry, but this music isn't really for you, is about as much as I can say. Like, maybe you can find something to relate to in the context of the music. But when I talk about things like a quote-unquote falling society, which is a line of lyrics from Fake Beach, this isn't me trying to imply that the reason why society is quote-unquote falling is because queer people exist And because for whatever reason, it's kind of wild how for whatever reason young people don't want to work for minimum wage when that kind of wage can't afford you like half of the housing market to any point. If you live alone, good luck. If you live together with people, then that's just something to get used to, because that's going to be going on for quite some time. Musically, which is kind of where I want to go next with this monologue. This album's general purpose is to more or less be like a culmination of everything that I've done up to this point. I want the music on this album to be a representation of everything that I've done up until this point. I want it to represent the growth that I've had as both a music writer and a music producer, and to show just how much those things have grown over the past 6 or 7 years that I've been doing this more seriously than before. I want that to be shown partially via the fact that I make a lot of musical and lyrical references back to my original material. And that's something that sometimes happens unplanned. Sometimes I will just subconsciously go back to an idea that I once had that may or may not have gone into a song that made it onto an album. There's a few moments on this album where I reference either lyrically or musically something that on my YouTube channel sits alone as a demo, but never actually made it onto one of my previous 3 albums. An example of that would be, if I can find it, so warning, my mouse is coming out. On Lucid, there is a background vocal that happens somewhere in this middle section. Let's see. In the background there, in the left and the right ear, there's a vocal that's saying "Life passed us by," which is a direct quote to a track called Phantom Pain that I'm not quite thinking back to it now, like reflecting back on it, because every now and then I'll go back and listen to those older demos just to like experience what my skill level, both music writing wise and production wise, was back then, but also to see if I can gather some sort of inspiration for newer material from this older stuff. And looking back at it now, that track I dislike quite aggressively. There's a lot that I don't like about what I did with that song and why it exists in the first place. But this specific line of lyrics kind of came through because it's in the same key as the section that is on Lucid, and also because just that halftone vibe lended itself to it. I was like, I need some sort of background vocal to say something. I didn't want it to just be like a held note, so why not just use a lyric from a song that never actually is going to end up on an album? So that's one of those. Another one is the 2.5 minute instrumental outro to Fake Beach with Plastic Water is very much a musical nod to what my demo titled Flight was, which, at least for the first half of that song, was very much just a continuous grind in the same key, just to give you that that feeling of being able to potentially drift into a trance listening to it, but knowing that if you know the song, that is going to change. That sort of vibe isn't really what the vibe with Fake Beach is. This song leans more into the the discomfort of it. There's like, even though the continuous note that is happening over and over and over and over again for a solid 2 minutes is D. That's not really the key that we're in, because the song itself and the chorus are very much in G minor. And so we're basically constantly sitting in the dominant, which is why the D is very prominent in this section. And we're using notes that if you wanted to feel like it was in D major, would feel very out of place and very tension building. And that's basically what that section is. It's designed to build tension and never really release it. Like, I'm not trying to have the listener feel as if that section is at any point in a major key. It is very much like that uncomfortable vibe that I'm going for with pretty much all of the music on the album so far. And so let's go back. So I've been doing the thing where I drift off thought-wise for a while. So let's just to finish off the video and, you know, finish off my thoughts about all this so far, let's just talk about the actual music parts of it. I gotta focus. So Lucid, almost right off the bat, makes a musical reference to one of the riffs on the Depths title track. Right off the get-go. It's not the same notes, but the general pattern of notes, like the shape of the melody, is the same, and the overall like the tempo is very, I don't think it's the same. I would have to go back and check like the BPM. I don't think it's the same, but the vibe is the same and the drums are the same. Almost right off the get-go. It's if I can find it, it is that part, the do 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 do. That's ripped straight from that. Lucid also makes lyrical callbacks to the words "waning rose," which is a lyric off of a Soul Deep Stare from Esoteric. It makes in the chorus, it uses the word rearranged, which is a word that I used in like that big like climactic moment in The Inevitable, where essentially the story of that album is concluded, and then everything after that moment is kind of like an outro or the resolution if this was a movie of some kind. So that word gets used. I talked about the life passed us by thing being a reference. And as far as I remember, that's more or less everything. The I believe it's the A flat that's being played over and over in the beginning is something that I shamelessly ripped from Tesseract's new album in their outro to Legion, which just to make a comment on it, I think Legion is one of the best songs that was released this year, just by any band, period. The vocal performance on that song is absolutely incredible, and I wish that I had that level of control of my voice. Although with this music, I don't know if long-time Return to Life listeners, if all two of you can feel it, but with this album I am trying to push myself vocally as much as I can, because it's, again, the thing that drives me to improve as a singer. Even though I'm not a singer, I just have to sing because I'm the only person in this fucking band. So that's kind of the objective here. But yeah, that A flat is very much like stolen straight from the end of that song. I was listening to that song a lot, and I was like, you know what, why don't I steal that? And there's another moment on Lucid that I am a huge fan of, that kind of sneaks up at you very unexpectedly, especially if you I haven't released the instrumental version of this song, and I don't know if I will, maybe somewhere on like Bandcamp or whatever. I'll drop the instrumental album when it's done. But this section I actually extended. Like, the original The original section that you're about to hear was originally half as long, but because as I was writing it, I was feeling more and more that this was a direct Cloudkicker ripoff. And the thing that I've always liked about Cloudkicker music is how much he's able to take a very, like, let's say, simple and repetitive idea and slowly over time build it into something that feels like it goes on forever. Like it genuinely feels in some of the songs that there's an idea that goes on for like 5 minutes in a row. But even though it's the same thing over and over, it feels like something about it is changing every time. And emotionally, the song is still going somewhere, and we're not just stuck in like an endless loop of hearing the same riff or melodic motif over and over again. So that's the kind of vibe that as I was, putting the section together, I very much picked up on, and I was like, you know what, why don't I lean into it and make it go on for longer. I re-recorded the center melody guitar just to add that feeling of like growth. But yeah, this section, as I affectionately refer to being the Cloudkicker section, in my personal tab for this music, I'm a huge fan of. It happened by accident, as most things that I write do. I was just messing around, reusing the same rhythmic motif as the start of the song, just in a different key. Instead of it being C sharp minor, it's an E major, related key, but it's, I guess, still different. And just the way that it came about, especially instrumentally, because I pretty much always record and write the instrumental parts first and then add vocals later. Sometimes I have vocals that are pre-planned that I'll write music around. That's something that happened a little bit more with Fake Beach. I smoothed the transition into it vocally a little bit by using some sneaky transition notes. But this section I'm absolutely like in love with in retrospect. And when this song was the only one that I had going musically, I was like, so far this is the highlight of the album for me. I don't know, I don't know if you, the listener, would agree with me, but this part to me is just so cool. And then immediately back into that G sharp slash A flat. In this key, it would be a G sharp. Uh, Immediately back into it as a musical callback to the start of the song, except this time with some extra notes because we have context. The song starts without any context, so that A flat, G sharp, it could be anything. But once we have at least a little bit of an idea as to where we are in terms of the song structure, that note very much becomes a G sharp with some extra context. With, I think there's like a B and a D sharp along in the harmony there, something like that is going on there. I need to go back and verify. I don't have perfect pitch, so to me this is all just black magic. But yeah, that section to me was so cool when I did it. The next song, We Were Always Here, I very much lean into my newfound appreciation and enjoyment of the Thal genre. In early 2022, I discovered, I knew of them before and I had tried listening to them before and I didn't really understand them. But early last year, I listened to Staden under Vatten by Vildhjarta. My pronunciation is not very Swedish, as I am not Swedish. But that album like convinced me that Thal was very much something that I A, enjoyed, and B, like had a massive newfound respect for, because again, I personally love bands, whatever genre they're in, that essentially are pioneers of their own sound, much like Vildhjarta pioneered Thal, much like how Meshuggah pioneered gent, as much as people debate whether that's a real genre. as much as just to throw words out there. 100 gecs invented hyperpop. That sort of vibe, that sort of musical ambition is something that I respect a lot in artists that I listen to. So with We Were Always Here, that's more or less what I leaned into. I leaned into that Thal sound. I played a lot of the open E string, just for some context. Part of the reason why some of the other music, there's been quite a bit of music that I've done since releasing Esoteric. One of those things was the demo that I dropped at the very start of the year that was just called 2023 Demo 1. Part of the reason why that music, I'm not sure if it's going to exist on this album, is because I started writing Lucid almost immediately when I finally got a new guitar that I had ordered like months and months and months ago, and it took a long time for it to get here. And when it finally did, I was like, all right, it's time to go. So I'm actually kind of debating whether I could just do an entire album with one guitar, which is fairly, it hasn't happened before. Every other album has at least two guitars on it. This one, I'm thinking maybe it's possible to do a whole sound or a whole record with just one. That guitar being the Schecter Hellcat 6 that's in that video where I play through, quote unquote, play through very much with quotes, where I play through Fake Beach, that guitar. And so I'm basically tuning it to like various tunings that are just an octave below standard. So Fake Beach is just drop D, but an octave below standard. We Were Always Here is standard E, an octave below. And then Lucid, because I really wanted to play a C sharp when I had, because that like song started with that piano thing that started at the beginning. I was like, I want that C sharp to be in the guitars. So I tuned it to standard tuning, but the E goes down to a C sharp, which is a little weird, but I'm okay with weird tunings. I'm not really a guitarist, so I don't really feel weird when I have to deal with intervals and stuff that don't feel normal to someone that's played in standard E for like 30 years. So yeah, We Were Always Here, very Thal. It has the riff that underlies that section where I genuinely just scream some very angry vocals. That riff is another one of those sections that, listening back to it, I was like, damn, I'm quite happy with how it turned out. It's kind of hard to hear it, especially in the non-instrumental version of the song, especially because in the second half, when the vocals actually come in, the riff changes a little bit. But that riff, I very much wrote like piece by piece by piece by piece, and then recorded like a bunch of pieces stuck together. And it was fairly tough for me because, like I said, I'm not a guitarist, so all of this guitar stuff is not easy for me. So that riff is another one of those moments that I was super happy with, which is somewhere in this ballpark. Oh, lyric call to Dillinger Escape Plan there. This song also has a lot of lyrical references. Not as many. Actually, there's a couple that refer back to Esoteric. Call the Weak and Ill Prepared is a lyric from Esoteric. I forget, just thinking back, if there's any more. But that song, especially because it talks partially about, at least in some capacity, talks about queer history. This song, as well as Fake Beach, are kind of U.S. centered in terms of their, I guess, geographical, and I get. How do I phrase this in terms of like where I'm grabbing the real life material from? That's generally the place that all of this that all the lyrics are drawn from. Uh, and so I'm kind of trailing off here a little bit. Uh, I guess the irony in that is the fact that I'm not American. So I've only ever been in the States for like 3 weeks out of my entire life, and I haven't been to very many cities. So in a way, it's kind of like an outsider's perspective as to what's happening in that country. That country. Um, but yeah, I don't quite remember the point that I was trying to make anymore. But yeah, that's a song that happens. And another thing that is kind of just remembered. Not the point that I was going to make, but another point that I wanted to make is that the fact that there is a very, very obvious musical callback to Esoteric with the song as well, that happens right around here, I think. So there's like four piano notes: the B, oh my voice sucks. The B, and then the E G sharp, or sorry, E G F sharp. Uh, those three notes, or those four notes, are note for note for. Am I Australian now? Are note for note, taken from the song Beggar, and then the jump back into G major, which is the key that song sits in for like the entire first half, basically. And so that idea of those four notes going back into G, and the notes that the guitars play in this next sequence, and the keyboard instruments more in the background here, are playing almost the exact same notes that the mallets, the marimbas, are playing in Beggar, except because this section is actually written and felt in 6/8, and the Beggar section is 4/4. The rhythmic pattern of it is different, and so it seems like it's not the same thing, but it is very much the same thing. And this was like intentional. When I was writing this, I was like, yeah, this is a good spot to do it. So that's something that happens here. Probably the most like blatant musical callback that I've done so far. That's something that happens here. The clean vocals that happened in the section before this were the only things that I recorded for this song before I got like violently ill, to the point where at the worst part of it, like my voice was completely gone. And it's been, I think, 4 or 5 weeks since this happened. And as you can kind of tell, it's still there. There's points where I gotta like clear my throat, because like it's still it still hasn't properly fully recovered. Like I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather, not like physically, but like voice wise especially. And so pretty much every other vocal that was recorded for this song, all of the cleans and all of the screaming and stuff, was done when I was like really under the weather. And so that's why, at least for now, in the demo version of this track, you might be able to tell that the vocals are a little bit scuffed. There was a portion towards the end where I wanted to go for a higher note, just to make the end feel a little bit more powerful. And I tried it once, and I was like, there ain't no way. There's no way I'm hitting that note right now, because the moment I get anywhere near my voice just is gone. It's nowhere to be found. So that's just a little bit of a note. And towards when I was doing the vocals for Fake Beach, that had more or less recovered. Like I think my voice at this point is about 95% back. And so doing the vocals for that song was a lot easier for me than doing the We Were Always Here lyrics, because that sucked. That was an awful couple days for me, because I'm like, I gotta get this done, because I just want to have a somewhat finished version of the song. I just have to push through it. So that's kind of what what that was. And yeah, musically, I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about with Fake Beach, other than the fact that the opening riff is an almost direct ripoff of Offworlder by Silent Planet off their new album. Once again, all of my material is very original. And that, like I already mentioned, the 2.5 minute outro is, at least in my mind when I was writing it, supposed to be a callback to Flight. Um, I don't think there's any lyrical references in that song other than just some edgy lyrics. Um, the only thing that trickled down was your fucking apathy, and the dying seems like fun line. That's just kind of that's me trying to um, release my inner Gen Z and just speak through memes instead of actually talking about how I feel. So, yeah, this has been quite a long video so far. We're at the 40-minute mark, and I knew going in that this was how it was gonna go, because I can just talk about random shit for hours and not really feel the time going by. But I will finish it here. So this was just supposed to be, like I said at the beginning, me just indulging in my personal desire to just talk about art as I'm making it. I love talking about things that I'm passionate about in general, but because music has and I think always will be the most important thing to me. Um, I just wanted to talk about it, and like I said, I couldn't really do that with Esoteric because that would defeat the purpose of the album. And so it's not like I couldn't, I just didn't want to. But with this album, because it is more open, it's more forward with its intentions, I kind of decided to go back and talk about it for a little bit. So this, I don't know if this might be the only one of these that I do for this album, because there's, like I said, there's a tonal shift coming up, and there's a few songs coming up that I'm not sure if I'm going to drop until the album drops. Maybe I'll do a shorter video in the future where I just talk about some newer songs when I'm finished them. But for now, this is about it. I probably missed something. I'll probably, be mad at myself when I watch this back sometime in the future. But hopefully this was at least somewhat entertaining. Maybe not. Who knows? This is me signing out. Have a good night, everybody.